On July 7 Johnson announced his immediate resignation as party leader but said that he would remain as Prime Minister until the Conservatives had chosen a new leader. On September 6, Liz Truss, Johnson's Foreign Secretary, replaced him as Prime Minister, though her tenure in office would prove to be the shortest in British history. Still immensely popular with the party's base, Johnson was under consideration as Truss's replacement despite his fall from grace. During the scramble to choose a new Conservative leader in October, Johnson made a hurried return to Britain from a vacation in the Dominican Republic, but he chose rather quickly to stand aside in deference to Sunak. On June 9, 2023, Johnson received the final report of the Privileges Committee, a cross-party investigatory body that had been tasked with determining whether or not he had willingly misled Parliament during the Partygate scandal. He announced his resignation as MP that day, decrying the committee as a kangaroo court that had been determined to drive me out of Parliament. After stepping down, Johnson reverted to being a backbench MP. Following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Johnson took part in Charles II's accession council. After Liz Truss announced her resignation as Conservative Party leader on October 20, 2022, Johnson received more than the 100 MPs nominations required to stand in the leadership election, but soon announced that he would not stand. In May 2023, Johnson was referred to the police by the Cabinet Office regarding previously unknown potential breaches of COVID regulations between June 2020 and May 2021, to which Johnson's office issued a statement criticizing the unfounded suggestions, which has all the hallmarks of yet another politically motivated stitch-up. On June 9, 2023, the publication of his 2022 Prime Minister's resignation honours led to a public feud with Sunak. Johnson supporter Nadine Dorries announced that she was resigning as an MP due to not being included as a peer on the honours list. The same day, after receiving a confidential report from a committee of the House of Commons that was looking into whether he had lied to Parliament over lockdown-breaking parties, Johnson announced his resignation as MP. His resignation statement said he is not alone in thinking that there is a witch hunt underway, to take revenge for Brexit and ultimately to reverse the 2016 referendum result. On June 15, the Commons Privileges Committee published their report, which concluded that Johnson lied to and deliberately misled the House of Commons over Partygate, misled the committee themselves during the hearing, and acted in contempt of the committee itself through a campaign of abuse and intimidation. The report noted that had Johnson still been an MP, the committee would have recommended he be suspended from Parliament for 90 days. The contents of the report represented a recommendation to the House of Commons, which accepted the report by 354 votes to 7. Johnson, with students and lecturers of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev, Ukraine, January 22, 2023. On June 16, Johnson was unveiled as a new columnist for the Daily Mail. The news website Politico Europe reported that Johnson would be paid a very high six-figure sum. Johnson reportedly informed the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments half an hour before the columnist assignment was publicly announced. The committee ruled that Johnson committed a clear breach of the rules since he had not sought its advice on the matter within an appropriate time frame. In October 2023, Johnson announced he would join the television channel GB News as a commentator and program maker for the next general election and U.S. presidential election. Johnson condemned Hamas' attack on Israel, saying there can be no moral equivalence between the terrorism of Hamas and the actions of the Israeli Defense Forces. He rejected calls for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip during the Israel-Hamas war, and criticized pro-Palestinian protests in the UK. On November 5, 2023, Johnson visited Israel to express solidarity. In February 2024, Johnson had a private meeting with the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. In March 2024, The Times reported that Johnson is expected to campaign for the Conservatives in the next general election. On May 2, 2024, Johnson was turned away from his polling station for the Thames Valley Police and Crime Commissioner, after forgetting to bring valid photographic identification, a requirement of the Elections Act, which Johnson introduced while in office. When he arrived he had nothing to prove his identity except the sleeve of his copy of Prospect magazine, on which his name and address had been printed. He said that when he returned a few minutes later, with his driving license, he was then able to vote. During the 2024 general election, Johnson campaigned for the Conservatives, who lost the election in a landslide to Labour. Johnson's memoirs Unleashed are scheduled to be released in October 2024. Ideologically, Johnson has been described as a one-nation Tory. Political scientists have described Johnson's political positions as ambiguous and contradictory, encompassing nativist, authoritarian, and free market tendencies on the one hand, and one-nation liberal conservatism on the other. Some scholars have questioned Johnson's commitment to one-nation conservatism, instead characterizing his ideology as flexible and populist. Purnell stated that Johnson regularly changed his opinion on political issues, commenting on what she perceived to be an ideological emptiness beneath the staunch Tory exterior. During his tenure as mayor, Johnson gained a reputation as a liberal, center-ground politician, according to Business Insider. In 2012, the political scientist Tony Traverse described Johnson as a fairly classic, that is, small state mildly Eurosceptic conservative who also embraced modern social liberalism. The Guardian stated that while mayor, Johnson blended economic and social liberalism, with The Economist saying that in doing so Johnson transcends his Tory identity and adopts a more libertarian perspective. According to political scientist Richard Hayton, Johnson's premiership was about Brexit, which served as a national cause. Johnson evoked the discourse of popular sovereignty and anti-establishment populism to portray Parliament as seeking to sabotage Brexit, and in doing so, presented himself as the true representative of the people. Scholars of comparative politics have drawn comparisons between Johnson and other populist leaders such as Donald Trump and Viktor Orban. Some commentators have likened Johnson's political style to Trumpism, although others have argued that Johnson's stance on matters such as social policy, immigration, and free trade is liberal. Johnson biographer Gimson wrote that Johnson is economically and socially a genuine liberal, although he retains a Tory element through his love of existing institutions, and a recognition of the inevitability of hierarchy. In 2019, reacting to reports in The Sun, that Johnson had told cabinet colleagues he was basically a Brexity Hezza, former deputy leader of the Conservative Party Michael Heseltine wrote, "I fear that any traces of liberal conservatism that still exist within the Prime Minister have long since been captured by the right-wing, foreigner-bashing, inward-looking view of the world that has come to characterize his fellow Brexiters." Johnson expressed climate-sceptical views in several columns, conflating the distinction between weather and climate and highlighting a factually incorrect claim by weather forecaster and conspiracy theorist Piers Corbyn that reduced solar activity could lead to a mini ice age. Bloomberg News suggested that Johnson's interest in climate change increased after becoming Prime Minister, and suggested this could have been influenced by his wife Carrie Simons and father Stanley Johnson, who are both environmental campaigners. In 2019 and 2020, Johnson expressed support for the UK to have net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and spoke about increasing ambition for mitigating climate change through carbon capture and storage and a renewable energy transition. During the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, Johnson called for greater efforts towards climate change mitigation, and welcomed the prospect of coal phase-out. It was reported in 2022 that Johnson was convinced of the scientific consensus on climate change following a briefing by the chief scientist of the Met Office in January 2020, and subsequently made the issue a priority for his government. According to They Work For You as of 2022, Johnson has generally voted against what it described as key measures to prevent climate change while an MP, and other sources confirm this. Purnell believed it was the influence of Johnson's maternal family that led to him developing a genuine abhorrence of racial discrimination. In 2003, Johnson said, "I am not by any means an ultra-Eurosceptic. In some ways, I am a bit of a fan of the European Union. If we did not have one, we would invent something like it." As mayor, Johnson was known as a supporter of immigration. From 2009, He advocated a referendum on Britain's EU membership. In 2018, during Brexit negotiations, Johnson called for Britain to leave the single market and advocated a more liberal approach to immigration than that of Prime Minister May. He stated many people believed that Britain's EU membership had led to the suppression of British wages and said the EU was intent on creating a superstate that would seek to rob Britain of its sovereignty. In 2019, Johnson said he would take Britain out of the EU on October 31 whether there was a trade deal in place or not. Johnson also stated his opposition to a referendum on the Brexit withdrawal agreement. On August 19, 2019, Johnson wrote a letter to the EU asking for the removal of the backstop accord. The President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, rejected the proposal. On August 26, 2019, Johnson said that Britain would not pay £39 billion for the withdrawal agreement were the UK to leave without a deal. The European Parliament Brexit coordinator Guy Verhofstadt said there would be no further negotiation unless the UK agreed to pay the entire sum. Unionism and devolution. Johnson described himself as a fervent and passionate unionist. He proposed building an Irish Sea Bridge, but he later scrapped this initiative. The devolved administrations have criticized the Internal Market Bill for its re-centralization of control over commerce. Johnson has said that humor is a utensil that you can use to sugar the pill and to get important points across. He is said to have a genuine desire to be liked. Johnson has been described as having a light-hearted and charming persona. Many biographers and commentators suggest he has put significant effort into developing this version of himself. He has also been described as heavily focused on his own interests, with an often vitriolic or irresponsible way of conducting himself in private. Johnson has been described as a divisive, controversial figure in British politics. Supporters have praised him as witty and entertaining. Johnson has been accused of lying or making misleading statements throughout his career, and has been compared to former U.S. President Donald Trump. He has been considered a figure with broad appeal outside of the usual conservative support base. Johnson's premiership has been described by historians as the most controversial and scandal-affected since that of David Lloyd George about a century earlier. Since Johnson was born in New York City to British parents, he held British-American dual citizenship. In 2015, he agreed to pay capital gains tax to the U.S. tax authorities on a property that he inherited in the UK. He renounced his U.S. citizenship the following year. Johnson has knowledge of French, Italian, German, Spanish, Latin, and ancient Greek, frequently making classical allusions in his newspaper columns and his speeches. Sonia Purnell wrote in 2011 that Johnson was a highly evasive figure when it came to his personal life, who remained detached from others and who had few intimate friends. Among friends and family, Johnson is more commonly known as Al, short for his forename Alexander, rather than Boris. In 2007, Johnson said he had smoked cannabis before he went to university. He has also said he had used cocaine. Johnson partakes in cycling, tennis and Pilates, and returned to road running in 2023. He was considered obese in 2018 and overweight in 2020, and has spoken of making efforts to lose weight. Johnson previously owned a £1.3 million buy-to-let townhouse in Camberwell, South London. According to Homeland Registry documents, he bought the 4-bedroom property with his then-girlfriend Carrie Simons in July 2019. The Register of MPs' Interest states that Johnson had a rental income of at least £10,000 a year. In 2023, Johnson and Simons bought Brightwell Manor, a £3.8 million moat mansion in Brightwell-cum-Sotwell, Oxfordshire. Johnson was baptized Catholic and later confirmed in the Church of England, but has said that his faith comes and goes and that he is not a serious practicing Christian. In 2020, his son Wilfred was baptized Catholic. Johnson and Simons married in a Catholic ceremony at Westminster Cathedral on May 29, 2021. Since he was baptized Catholic, but his previous weddings were not conferred by the Catholic Church, they are considered putatively invalid. Johnson holds ancient Greek statesman Pericles as a personal hero. According to Johnson's biographer, Andrew Gimson, regarding ancient Greek and Roman polytheism, it is clear that Johnson is inspired by the Romans, and even more by the Greeks, and repelled by the early Christians. 739 Johnson views secular humanism positively and sees it as owing more to the classical world than to Christian thinking. However, in 2021, Johnson was asked if he held pre-Christian beliefs, which he denied, saying, "Christianity is a superb ethical system and I would count myself as a kind of very, very bad Christian. Christianity makes a lot of sense to me." In 1987, Johnson married Allegra Mostyn Owen, daughter of the art historian William Mostyn Owen and Italian writer Gaia Servadio. The couple's marriage ended in divorce or annulment in 1993, and 12 days later Johnson married Marina Wheeler, a barrister, daughter of journalist Charles Wheeler. 5 weeks later, their first child was born. They have 4 children: Laura Lettuce, Milo Arthur, Kasia Peaches, and Theodore Apollo. Between 2000 and 2004, Johnson had an affair with Spectator columnist Petronella Wyatt when he was its editor, resulting in a terminated pregnancy and a miscarriage. In April 2006, the News of the World alleged that Johnson was having an affair with Guardian journalist Anna Fazakerley. The pair did not comment. Shortly afterward, Johnson employed Fazakerley. In 2009, Johnson fathered a daughter with Helen McIntyre, an arts consultant. In September 2021, Johnson stated that he had, then, 6 children, thereby denying the existence of further illegitimate children. In September 2018, Johnson and Wheeler issued a statement confirming that they had separated months earlier. They divorced in 2020. Jennifer Arcuri said that she had an affair with Johnson from 2012 to 2016. In 2019, Johnson was living with Carrie Simons, the daughter of Matthew Simons, co-founder of the independent newspaper. Johnson and Simons became engaged in late 2019 and their son, Wilfred Laurie Nicholas Johnson, was born in April 2020. On May 29, 2021, Johnson married Simons at Westminster Cathedral. Their daughter, Romy Iris Charlotte Johnson, was born in December 2021. Their third child, a son named Frank Alfred Odysseus Johnson, was born in July 2023. Johnson is the eldest of the 4 children of Stanley Johnson, a former Conservative member of the European Parliament, and the painter Charlotte Johnson Wall, née Fawcett, the daughter of Sir James Fawcett, President of the European Commission of Human Rights. His younger siblings are Rachel Johnson, a writer and journalist, Leo Johnson, a broadcaster, and Joe Johnson, ex-Minister of State and former Conservative MP for Orpington, who resigned from his brother's government in September 2019 and is now a member of the House of Lords. Johnson's stepmother, Jenny, the second wife of his father Stanley, is the stepdaughter of Teddy Seif, the former chairman of Marks and Spencer. Having been a member of the Conservatives between 2008 and 2011, Rachel Johnson joined the Liberal Democrats in 2017. She stood as a candidate for Change UK in the 2019 European elections. Johnson also has 2 half-siblings, Julia and Maximilian, through his father's later marriage to Jennifer Kidd. Johnson's paternal grandfather, Wilfred Johnson, was an RAF pilot in Coastal Command during the Second World War. Wilfred Johnson's father was the Ottoman Interior Minister and journalist Ali Kemal. Ali Kemal's father was a Turk while his mother was a Circassian reputedly of slave origin. His other paternal ancestry includes English, German and French. One of his German ancestors was said to be the illegitimate daughter of Prince Paul of Württemberg and thus a descendant of George II of Great Britain, which was later confirmed on an episode of Who Do You Think You Are? Johnson's mother is the granddaughter of Elias Avery Lowe, a paleographer and a Russian Jewish immigrant to the U.S., and Pennsylvania-born Helen Tracy Lowe Porter, a translator of Thomas Mann. Referring to his varied ancestry, Johnson has described himself as a one-man melting pot. Johnson was given the middle name Boris after a white Russian émigré named Boris Litwin, who was a friend of his parents. Thank you for watching this video.